working with. Started before I did. I don't date you, but 26 years ago, I met her and I've never used anyone else. I just don't. And I'll tell you right now, she's a true title rep. A lot of people come in, they say they know the business. She's done above and beyond for her, the job that she does, she's done above and beyond. I can honestly attest to her skills and talent, and she's a friend of mine. I mean, we've become pretty close throughout the years. But if you haven't met with her, set up a time to meet with her. She's got a ton of tools that'll help you out, ton of knowledge in the business. And you definitely want to make sure that you're ordering these preliminary title reports. Take a list. You want to make sure that it's not, that it's the people that own the home, especially if someone's passed away and they say they have a living trust, you can get yourself in a major lawsuit. If that person is not the trustee or the home is not, let's say you put it on the market and they said they're in a trust. This happened to me actually. And the house, the people they didn't even know that the person who owned it had done a refinance. And when they did the refinance, they did a reverse mortgage. When they went to escrow took it out of the trust. The trustee didn't know, which was her daughter. We put it on the house, we put it on the market and it wasn't even marketable. I could have got majorly sued for that. So be aware of these things happen. You want to make sure there's no liens or encumbrances on the property. Sometimes I just took a listing, we did a prelim. The guy had like 4 or 5 liens he wasn't even aware of. And these will delay your timeframes. But anyway, anything, go ahead, you got like.
Yeah, just a couple minutes. I'm going through. So our Chicago Agent One app that most of you already have and have been registered for, and if you're not, I'm happy to get you registered. They have some new updates. Really, really good updates. So I'll leave flyers for you if you want to pick one up. They have a impact of different price points where you can put in your customers, your clients' property address. Put in a price point, it gives you all of the scenarios regarding that price point, then you can put in the next one and the next one, and it provides a sheet side-by-side comparison, which is great for your sellers, so they can, see exactly what they're gonna get at the different price points. One of the other calculators that came in is waiting cost. So it also lets you, if they're on the fence, they're not sure what they wanna do, this gives them a scenario of what it's gonna cost by putting it off. Not putting it on the market right away, what their costs will be. And then there's a new one that is rent versus sell, which is a great tool as well. Is it going to work out for them at this point to just rent their property or actually sell it? So those are some new tools for you. The other thing I want to show you is if you've got clients with little kids and you're getting ready closing, we created these little coloring books for them. It says, I love my new home. And it talks about, the process, getting adjusted through school of that. And we have the crayons that go with it. So if you ever need those, I'll leave a little stack out there with crayons and coloring books. So those are available. And then I'll leave a flyer on who pays for what. Generally, you guys know everything, is negotiable, it seems these days, but customarily who normally pays for what in a transaction. So some of the newer agents, this might be handy to have. And then I've got pop buy ideas. So if you guys are doing some pop buys, so for October and November, we've got little things that you can, ideas for you. I will always carve out time for you. Chicago makes a really cute carving spoon for pulling out seeds. So you guys can always get a few of those together, create your little tag and do your pop buys for that. What else? There's little flashlights. We have little flashlights that you can use that says, don't be stuck in the dark about real estate. Call me for a flash, or I'll be there in a flash. So you can use little tiny flashlights, that kind of stuff. But I got some great ideas. If you guys want to sit down and go over some of these tools, we have these available as well. And last but not least, we've got scripts. So if there's anything that you guys want to sit down and go over, I've got some ideas for scripts and texting and things regarding this market.
Just talk about them.
Yep, and the government shutdown. I was just talking to April about it. The way it affects us, all our county recorder offices are open. But what could delay a closing is if your client's property has IRS liens, some other governmental liens, judgments, sometimes even a child support lien or a spousal support lien. Those kind of things we need to have demands on in order to close your escrow. And those might be delayed with the government shutdown, so just keep that in mind. And again, with your prelims, you get a listing, please call and open the prelim, because those are some of the things that we will look out for and get started for you.
Yeah.
Welcome, Sean.
So, you wanna, when you're writing an offer, because of the situation we're in right now, you know that might be an issue. Make sure you convey that to the other agent and write that accordingly in your, as far as your contingencies. Or, you don't wanna put 12 days and you'll get this done, and you can't. And people are gonna understand. Don't be afraid of telling the truth to the other person. But just explain your situation and what's going on. All right.
So Greg,
Go ahead.
you're gonna go
No,
ahead
you go
and
ahead.
introduce Greg? Well, I'm gonna say Greg and I have been working together for many, many years. I don't even know, 20 or something. We kind of get together, do office meetings and presentations. And one of the things that I love about Greg's presentation is he makes it understandable. So regarding 1031 exchanges, it is amazing how it seems to be so hard and so people have fear going into a 1031 exchange. It's gonna be so confusing. He explains it like you're gonna know it like the back of your hand, and he is there for you, and he's got people in the office that are there for you, and ways that can work for it. He even has paperwork that he can send to you after the meeting that helps you to understand as well, that you can keep in your file. But great ideas, a great way to get to know your clients and the process. So Greg Burns with IPX.
Come on.
1031 Exchange.
I just want to add to that too. So when you're in this business, if you have someone like this on your team, because technically he can be on your team, it's just going to add more value to what you offer. Don't try to overstep what you know. Just call him, let him meet with your clients, set them up. You're going to get a wealth of knowledge right now. And I'm telling you, take notes or try to record it. Like last time you came to our you did a presentation, I was blown away. It was really, really good. But anyway, take it away.
All right, thank you guys. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So, yeah, it's so amazing what the title insurance companies are putting together now. So when Dory and I first started, title companies were all about like, what could you do for me? Like, could you take me to a Lakers game, or could you? And then that went away. They can't do anything for you anymore. They can give you a bottle of water. But and now so they invest heavily in technology. So it really is amazing to me, all of the cool tech tools that they put together to allow you guys to, get more business. The exchange market is pretty good. I've been with the company for 26 years. And last month I did about 200 exchanges, like 203 exchanges actually for last month, which is a lot. And it represents a better market than the overall market in general, right? So historically, most of my customers, 70% of my customers are, like agents from like Marcus and Millichap and CB Richard Ellis. They're guys who are selling like apartment buildings, industrial deals, retail centers like this. And I would say probably over the last 18 to 24 months, that has kind of flipped to residential. So the commercial market has more listings than they've ever had. Since in the 26 years that I've been doing it, they have more listings for sale than they've ever had. And so there's a ton of listings out there. Prices have been coming down a little bit. And on the residential side, you guys had a lift in number of listings that are available, but that kind of plateaued and is kind of flattened out. And so people are exchanging for lots of different reasons. For those of you that have never done a 1031, 1031 is section 1031 of the tax code, which allows someone who owns property they've held for investment or business use to sell it and then trade it for another property that they intend to hold for investment or business use. So it could be any real estate, right? So you could exchange, like I got a client right now that's selling off, on the way up here, they called me, they're selling off a residential house and they own a store company, and they're actually buying one of the stores that they operate their business at. So it could be any kind of real estate, and that kind of gets confusing sometimes, especially for tax advisors, because within 1031, there's something that says you have to buy a like kind of property. So over the course of my career, I've had lots of conversations with clients and tax advisors. Like I had a client not that long ago that sold some vacant land, and he was looking to buy an improved property. He's actually looking to buy a property in Shell Beach. And his CPA said, "Oh, you can't do that. You have to buy a like kind property, which is just vacant land. You can't go buy something that's got improvements on it," which is absolutely not true. So any real estate, as long as it's held for investment or business use, qualifies, right? So I could sell residential, I could buy commercial, I could sell, industrial, buy residential. I had a client 2 years ago, sold some vacant land in the San Fernando Valley to McDonald's for $2.5 million. He lived in Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he wanted to go buy residential houses in and around that market. And I said, well, how much do those houses cost? And he said they cost between $200,000 to $250,000. And I'm like, well, if you buy the top end of that, you're going to have to buy at least 10 homes. He's like, yeah, I'm retired now. He's like, I don't have a lot to do. I was like, well, let me tell you something. If you do this, you're going to have a lot to do. So he did. He ended up selling off the land and then 1031 exchanging and buying 14 properties in and around Tulsa, Oklahoma. He now has double full-time jobs managing these properties. Yeah, I talked to him not that long ago. He said, yeah, I bit off maybe a little more than I could chew. So he actually may sell a few of those property, consolidate them into a single property, because managing these properties is a little bit too much for him. But I said, well, he's like, I know you told me so, but I'm like, well, it is what it is. So the nice thing about 1031, it allows the investment real estate economy to keep moving, right? Yeah.
Just on that example, is
Yeah.
there a certain amount of time they have to wait after they do the 1031 to be able to resell that property if they realize they kind of bit off too much?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, right? So I got a call today. I was actually on the wrong road. There's actually a road with the same name, but it's a street. And so I was sitting up there in a residential neighborhood, like about, 5 blocks up the road, called Dory. I'm like, I'm not definitely at the right place. So she guided me back here. And I was on the phone with one of my customers. They had sold their client an apartment building in May of this year. That the client did some improvements to it. They kind of gotten rents up, and the client wants to resell the property. So the question the client had, which was the same as his, is there a certain amount of time that I have to hold this in order to qualify for 1031? Well, within the tax code, there's nothing out there that really says, hey, you have to hold the property for a certain amount of time in order for it to qualify. There is a revenue procedure, and we'll talk about it, which is 2008-16, which says any property that's been held as an investment for 2 years or more, in an audit, the IRS is not able to challenge the held for investment portion of the exchange. So I know that if I hold it for 2 years, I never have to worry about it. What if I want to hold it for less time? Like in this guy's case, by the time he kind of gets ready to sell it and they sell it, probably will be around a year, maybe a little bit more. I could exchange it. And the answer, I think, is yes. I know there is something within the tax code which says a property that's held primarily for sale does not qualify. And the reason that they put that in the tax code is because they didn't want to see developers doing exchanges or people that were flipping properties doing exchanges. So flips are typically not good candidates for 1031. Now, does that mean that I've never done an exchange on a flip? No, I've done exchanges on lots of flips. You just have clients that are taking an aggressive position and are saying, well, if I get audited, I'm going to explain my position. I did one for a client last month. They built a property from ground up. They said, I tried to rent it, maybe not very hard, for 3 or 4 months. Nobody was able to rent it, so now I'm selling. And if the IRS or the Franchise Tax Board ever tries to challenge me, my position is going to be, look, I made an effort to rent it. I couldn't rent it. I had decided to sell it, do an exchange. So ground up development, I think that might be a losing battle. A flip, I think maybe a better case, but so there is no real definitive timeline. So it's a question of like, what did you do with it? So like in this guy's case, the guy that bought the properties in Oklahoma, even if he held them for a shorter period of time, I think if he sold some and did an exchange, if he were ever audited, he could just say, listen, I bought these properties, I rented them out, I fully intended on running them myself. I bit off a little bit more than I could chew, so I decided to sell these and consolidate them into a larger property that would be easier for me to manage. And I think that that's a reasonable position. So now, where does the 2-year thing come in? Like, why did they write this 2-year risk revenue procedure? That is primarily put in place for clients that were going to be converting investment property to personal use property. If you call me with one of your customers and say, hey, Greg, I've got a client that owns a property in LA, they want to sell that and they want to buy a property, a condo on the, water in Oxnard, and then they want to move there and make it their primary residence and retire there. How long do they have to hold it? I would tell you 2 years. I would say rely on that revenue procedure, try to hold it for 2 years. I also have a client, it's a really interesting case. So I had a client call me about a year ago, and this couple called me up and they said, hey, Greg, we've kind of run into a tax problem and we'd like to talk to you about it. I said, okay, what's going on? They said, 47 years ago, we bought a house in Montecito for like $450,000. And I said, okay. She said, today that house is worth almost $11 million. I said, well, I really wish I had those kind of problems, right? They said, but here's the deal. We are not wealthy people. This represents basically our retirement, right? Like we have 401ks or whatever, but this is a huge chunk of our net worth. And we don't want to pay extravagant taxes because we only get a $500,000 exclusion. And to be honest with you, during the 40 some plus years that we've spent here, we've maybe spent $250,000 in repairs. So we would be looking at a significant tax liability if we sold it. So I said, okay. So I said, well, what do you guys want to do? They said, well, we want to maybe convert it to investment property. I said, okay. I said, well, do you have any debt? They said, no. I said, well, how much money do you need to go buy the place you want to retire? They said, oh, we want to buy this little condo. It was in Camarillo, I think maybe. And it's like $1.5 million or something. I was like, okay. I said, refinance your house, pull that cash out, go use that money to go buy that house. Rent your house out in Montecito and rent it out for 2 years, right? Because you don't want to leave it open to any possible audit risk. And then once they've held it for 2 years, they'll sell it. They'll take their $500,000 tax free because it was their primary residence 2 of the last 5 years, right? And then the balance of the funds are going to 1031 exchange that and go buy investment property. So it's a way that people can kind of get around that. And you see a lot of that in some of these areas where you have, when I first started, the $250,000 or $500,000, primary residency exclusion was very significant. Today, it's not as significant because you've seen these huge jumps in prices where clients have $1 million gains in their houses and they're like, we would love to sell, we'd like to move it downsize, but we don't want to pay taxes on $500,000. So that is a kind of a way that people can get around it if they have significant enough gains.
So that situation actually came up just this summer at a softball thing, and the gal had the exact same thing. She's going to pay about $400,000 in capital gains.
Yeah.
They're trying to figure out, and I said, well, you may want to take some money out to, refinance it or pull equity out, purchase something else.
Yeah.
And, but if they do that, if they do this situation,
Yeah.
and then she passes away and the kids inherit that property, what happens then? It's deferred taxes.
Right. So when someone passes away, the heirs get a step up in basis equal to the fair market value, whatever the property's worth. So the taxes just go away.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they don't know that amount's not owed
Right.
after the fact. If they hold that 1031, she passes.
Yeah.
And then they take over the property, they inherit it. It's a
They
step
can
up.
sell it, not paying taxes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Greg, in that situation, when those people took the money out to refinance to buy the
Yeah.
other home, do they still get, is that still part of the original gain? The money that they borrowed?
So the 1,500,000, if they sold it, right, and didn't do a 1031, could be potentially gain, right? Because it's, you know, the gain is the gain, but the money they're taking out of it is non-taxable because a refinance is a non-taxable transaction. So they refied the money out, bought a house all cash, 1,500,000 or a condo. And then, you know, and when they sell it, they're gonna take $500,000 off the stuff. So let's say they sell it for 11 million. Let's say they pay, I don't know, $300,000 in closing costs, right? So they have a net sales price of 10.7 million. Well, they're gonna take $500,000 tax-free, right? So that gets them to 10.2. And they're gonna have to buy something for 10.2 or greater, and they're gonna have $1.5 million of debt on that investment asset because they have debt on the property they're selling.
Yeah, I mean, so, like, I guess my question is, if someone's got that exorbitant amount of equity
Yeah.
and they did a refinance for 90% of the value of the property,
Uh,
are they getting out of paying that gain?
no,
No.
gain's still there, yeah. Doesn't matter how much equity that you have in. I'll give you a great example of that. So I had a client that had done multiple exchanges. His basis in this he bought a property for 3.6 million. He had a $2.8 million loan on it, right? And so financial crisis happens. It's a retail center in Ontario, which is out in the Inland Empire. It's basically set up for furniture stores. Well, at that time, it was like all the furniture stores had gone out of business. So he has a center. It's got a $2.8 million loan on it. It's worth 2.4 million. So he goes to the bank and says, I want to short sale this property. I've got somebody that's willing to give me 2.4 million. The bank agrees to it. Well, he goes, I need to do a 1031 because I only have 700, my basis in the property is 700,000. So if I sell it for 2.4, even though I have no money, I'm going to get zero cash. The bank's actually going to get $400,000 less money than I actually even borrowed, right? I'm still going to have a gain because I've done these exchanges over my lifetime and I have a low basis. I have $700,000 basis. I sell for 2.4 million. I'm going to have to pay taxes on the difference. So he says, you know what? My brother-in-law will loan me some money to buy a $2.4 million property. So I'm going to do a 1031 exchange. So all of a sudden, this 1031 language shows up in the contract, and the bank is like, how the hell are you going to do an exchange? You don't have any money. And he's like, yeah, well, I'm just going to try to figure it out, see if someone will do 100% seller financing or whatever. But he borrowed like 800 grand from his brother-in-law, or maybe he had, I don't know where he got it from, to complete an exchange because he's like, if I don't do that, I'm going to have to pay almost that much in taxes anyway. So he ended up doing an exchange, market came back and he, you know, did fairly well. But so there are situations where you could have no equity in a property because you refinanced it and then, you know, values go down, you know, and you end up having to do an exchange anyway. So, but exchanges are a good estate planning tool, right? You could exchange throughout your lifetime. When you pass away, your heirs going to step up in basis. And in California, right, since it's a community property state, your spouse gets a full step up. So if Dory and I were married, right, let's say we owned an investment property and I pass away, she inherits it. If you're not in a community property state, you only get a 50% step up. But in California, she would get a full step up. So she could sell that asset and not pay any taxes. So when clients come to me and say, oh, you know, I think I'm just going to sell this, pay the taxes, put the money in the bank so it's there for my wife, because we never outlive our wives, right? And so it's there for, I'm like, you'll really leave more money if you just keep it in the real estate. And when people typically tell me that, what they're really saying a lot of times is, maybe I don't want my wife to have to deal with the sale, but more times than not, it's like, I don't want to manage real estate anymore. And that's a big thing we're seeing from customers right now. They're like, listen, I am tired of the terrible teas of real estate. I'm tired of the taxes, the toilets, the tenants, the termites, all the fun things that are associated with managing property. I want to be a passive owner. I don't want to have to deal with this anymore. And so if you have someone that has a residential house, they're thinking, there's nothing out there that exists for me that I can 1031 into, that I could become a passive owner. But there actually is, there's something called a DST or Delaware Statutory Trust, where a client can exchange into a larger asset alongside other investors. So, there's companies that buy triple net lease investments, and we'll talk about those for a minute. There's companies that buy apartment buildings, there's companies that buy industrial deals, there's companies that go out and they buy self-storage facilities. So like one of my clients sold the deal for like 800,000. They had like $500,000 of equity. They didn't want to manage property anymore. And so they exchanged into this deal in Texas. It's 16 self-storage facilities, and they get paid 5.5% on their money. So they're exchanged in there. They don't manage it. They own a small fractional interest of each of these 16 properties. They get 5.5% on the money that the 500 grand they invested and every month, and they just collect a check. And every 5 to 7 years, those assets get sold. And then they can decide, hey, I want to do another 1031 exchange, or I want to cash out, or whatever they want to do, right? But it is a form of passive ownership. Now, there are also, if as you say, oh, well, I don't trust the company, I want to go buy my own deal. There are triple net lease investments that clients can buy, right? You see them all over the place, Walgreens, Jack in the Box, dollar stores, Starbucks. Starbucks doesn't own any of their locations. Well, that I'm aware of, right? Starbucks is in the coffee business. Well, I think technically they're in the sugar business, but they are in the business of opening new stores, right? They're like, I want to open as many new stores as I can. I don't want to tie my money up in real estate, but they want to act as a true owner of that property because they get the depreciation. There's lots of advantages for them. And so they sign something called a triple net lease, which makes them responsible for the taxes, the property taxes, the insurance on the property, the maintenance of the property. So like every McDonald's that you see, some McDonald's are owned by McDonald's, but everyone that you see, it's not owned by McDonald's. They sign a triple net lease because McDonald's wants to be responsible for how their property looks. They don't want to be dependent on a landlord to make sure that the property is always maintained, right? That's why you very rarely see like a rundown McDonald's, because McDonald's, has certain standards that they're required to keep, right? And so like a Starbucks, right? The investor owns it. Starbucks pays them rent. They pay their, mortgage if they have one, and whatever left over is theirs. It's net of all expenses, right? So they don't have to pay property taxes. They're not paying for maintenance fees. So all of that stuff, is kind of net of fees. So it's become a very popular form of ownership. And the reason is because you can buy deals anywhere in the US. Now, is it without risk? Well, no. What did we just recently learn about Starbucks? Has anybody read any recent news about what's going on with Starbucks? The news is pretty toxic, I would say. So Starbucks is closing stores. They're closing a bunch of stores, right? And so if you own a Starbucks, right, and they come to you and they go, there's a one in Monrovia, where a city that I live in, where it's almost a brand new Starbucks, but it doesn't have a drive-through. And it hasn't done very well. They're closing that store. It has only been open for about 12 months. So if you are that, landlord, you're going to work out a deal with Starbucks, to find a way to get them to pay you some rent, but you're going to have to find a new tenant, right? Or a Starbucks lease is expiring and they go, hey, the store's not been doing that great. We're not going to renew our lease. Well, guess what? You're going to have to find a new tenant, right? So there is some risk associated with them, but they have become a pretty popular form of ownership. When I first started 26 years ago, I knew one guy in Encino that sold these types of investments, and they were only sold to basically institutional, companies. Now I know more than 400 agents that sell only those types of investments, and they're sold to primarily just mom and pop, types of investors. So if you have a client that owns, a couple of rental properties and goes, listen, I'm tired of like dealing with tenants and they're always complaining about it. Well, this might be a good opportunity for them, right? Another thing that's popular right now for 1031, clients are buying properties for their kids, right? So there's nothing in the tax code which says you can't rent a property with your kids. Let's face it, I got 4 kids. I look at them and I'm like, how are they ever going to be able to afford a house, to buy a house? Houses are so expensive, right? So which means I'll probably have to work for the rest of my life to help them buy houses. But so, you know, so it's like parents are saying, listen, I own this investment property. Rather than me waiting to die to give it to them, why don't I just 1031 exchange and buy something that they can live in now? They'll be my tenant, they'll pay me rent. I'll put the property in a trust. I'll make them trustee of the trust and I'll make them the beneficiary of it. So when I die, they get the house, right? But then I get an opportunity to see them, you know, kind of have pride of ownership. They own their own house and I'm helping them now opposed to waiting till I pass away, right? So you're seeing a fair number of people do that. Also, people are exchanging into a home that they ultimately want to retire in, right? So you see people that are like, hey, I'm selling this investment property, I'm buying a property in, you know, Palm Desert because that's where we want to retire, or that's where we want our second home. So as long as they hold that property as an investment for at least 2 years, right? After that, they can kind of do whatever they want with it. So people press me on this thing all the time, which is like, okay, well, we're selling this rental in Ventura. We're going to go buy this property in Palm Springs. Hey, look at all the new shares. You know, how long do I have to hold that as an investment? Like, what do I have to rent it all the time? What's the deal? And so you can use it as a vacation rental. Vacation rentals say that you've got to rent the property out for at least 2 weeks a year at fair market value. And the client's not supposed to use it for more than 14 days a year for personal use. So the clients are always coming to me saying, well, like, how are they going to know how much I use the property? Right? If I show 2 weeks of income on it, how is the IRS or the franchise tax board ever going to know how much time that I spend there? What I tell them is this: what you do with this property after you complete your exchange is between you, God, and your CPA. But the IRS has subpoena power. They can subpoena your power records. And it's pretty easy to look and see on your power records when someone's there because there'll be spike in electricity usage, right? Like the other day, like a month ago, I have a place at the river, at the Colorado River in Parker, Arizona, and I was out there with my son. We left to go to Yuma, came back, and we swung back by the house. My son's like, I got to use the bathroom. So I turned the AC on, and then we left, and my wife called me like, you know, I don't know, 2 weeks or 3 weeks after we had left and looked on the app and said, you were aware that you did not turn the AC off. I was like, darn it. So it's pretty easy to see those spikes, right? But ultimately it's between them to kind of figure it out. Now, I do have clients that will say things like, oh, well, I'm going to buy this property and I'm going to, you know, have my corporation rent for me and I'm just going to live there. That's a tax planning strategy. I wouldn't suggest it, but I'm not their CPA, right? And so, which brings up kind of a good point. As agents, most of the time, you're competing with another agent to get a listing, right? And so I think a lot of times, you know, we try to go above and beyond, right? Even in my business, Dory's business, right? We try to do whatever we can to help you guys get these deals to the finish line or get the listing. And I think that anytime you're out of your area of expertise, a answer is okay. Like the answer should come from the professional, right? And certainly, you know, knowing about 1031 and what they can buy, all that stuff is great. But if they ask you a question like, hey, if I just decide to sell my property and pay my taxes, what kind of taxes am I going to have to pay? That's like a tax question, right? So you're like, you have to just kind of take the position, listen, I don't do your taxes. I have no way of knowing that. I'm not really a tax professional. But the answer I typically give clients is this. At a minimum, you're going to pay 24, actually it's not 0.5, it's 24.3%. That's the minimum tax that you can pay. That's 15% federal and 9.3% state, right? That's the minimum tax that you can pay on the sale of investment property. Now, that's a good answer. And what I tell them with this, based on how big your gain is, based on your income level, how much depreciation you've taken, that percentage could go up. And a lot of my clients end up in the 30s and then just stay out of it, right? You know, you'll have clients who'll say, oh, well, like, can you help me figure it out? And be like, no, right? I don't even get it. I am certainly qualified to figure that out. I don't even get involved in it. I will direct them to our website. I go, here's a calculator that you can use to kind of get an idea of what you're going to pay in taxes. And I'm going to send you guys, I'll send you this brochure in PDF format. I'll send you our reverse exchange brochure, which we'll talk about in PDF. I'll send you our booklet in PDF and then my V card. Take that stuff, create a 1031 file folder and just put it on your desktop. Because I can guarantee you 6 months from now, you're going to be like, what was the name of that good looking guy that was in there talking about 1031? But if you have that on your desktop, right, you can have it at your fingertips. So if somebody says, oh, you know, I'm thinking about selling my rental property, or you can say, hey, you know, have you ever thought about selling your rental property and doing a 1031? They're like, well, I never really thought about it. You know, have you thought about maybe we can increase your cash flow, right? Like, you know, like, especially in areas like this where values are pretty high, if you can sell assets here and then buy in areas where values are not as high, a lot of times you can get better cash flows, right? Or like I got a client right now, sold a single family residence where he was, you know, making fairly decent money, and he's going to take those funds and go buy a fourplex. And the reason he's doing that is like, I'm getting towards my retirement years. And when I lose a tenant in the house, I lose 100% of the income that property produces. If I buy a fourplex and I lose one of my tenants, I've only lost 25% of my income, right, on that asset. So they look at that a way to kind of diversify themselves a little bit. So lots of reasons why people do trades. Also, remember, you can do it geographically. Like I say all the time, and no one ever takes my advice, but I say it all the time in meetings. I'm like, if 1031 became a rollover provision tomorrow, right? And I became a real estate agent, the very first thing I would do is call Dory and I would say, and I want all of the non-owner occupieds in Camarillo that do not live in California. That's my #1 target list. Because I'm going to call those folks and say, hey, I see you've owned this property in Camarillo. I see you currently live in Arizona. Is that right? Yeah. Is it challenging for you to manage that asset here in California, being in Arizona or Florida or wherever the hell they live? You know what the answer is? 100% yes. I own a property in Huntington Beach, right? A 4-unit. It's managed by a buddy of mine who owns a property management company. Last month, he charged me $90 twice to change 2 light bulbs at that property. You know how frustrating that is to me? To be like, I just paid $180 to change 2 light bulbs. But the reality of it is, he has to send a guy to go do it. And that's what it costs, right? So, you know, I would talk to people, say, have you ever thought about selling this property, buying a property closer to where you live so it's easier for you to manage? I'm doing an exchange right now for a client that lives in Texas, selling a property in Anaheim Hills for that very reason. She called me up. She's like, I am done getting on an airplane every time there's a major issue with that house because my husband wants to go look at it. So her husband literally is like, oh yeah, plumbing's bad. You know, they say we need to fix da. We got to go fly and look at it. He's like, you're kidding me, right? Like, I don't want to do this anymore. So, those are prime targets. Yeah.
2 things. Some of the agents here are new. Can you explain how they meet in a combinator, what that is?
Yeah.
What that details. And then secondly, is there any benefit? I know that different states have different tax benefits and codes. Is there a way to shelter or protect or pay less if you sell here, buy there, anything like that?
There used to be. So California's always had a clawback provision, right? It's something that says we'll let you sell your property here in California, 1031 exchange it, go buy a property in a different state and defer the taxes. And you could still do that. But if you ever sell that property in another state, California wants you to come back to them and say, hey, you know what? I know you didn't know that I sold this property in Arizona, but I did, and I cashed out, and I'm here to pay you my taxes, right? No one was doing that. So about 10 years ago, California instituted a filing requirement. So you could sell a property in California, 1031 exchange, go buy a property in another state, but you have to file something with California every year showing that you still own that property. And if you were selling and cash out of it, California wants their taxes. Now, you could sell it and do another exchange and still defer the taxes, but if you ever cash out of it, they want their tax money. Now, there's an interesting case study going on right now with one of my clients. He doesn't know he's a case study, but he is. So I have a client named Tim who owned a lot of California real estate, sold it and exchanged into Nevada, Arizona, Texas, and Tennessee. So he did it at the time that they implemented this new filing requirement. And so I went to him and I said, hey, Tim, this is new filing requirement. What are you guys doing about it? It's challenging for you to do because you did a bunch of exchanges. He doesn't own any more California real estate and he lives in Nevada now. He said, I'm not doing it. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, I'm not doing it. He's like, what are they going to do to me? He's like, I don't own any more California real estate. I'm not a California resident. What are they going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. Let me know how that works out. So it'll be interesting to see how, if they ever come back to him and try to get it to get taxes. But, and so let's talk about just like a regular 1031, what that looks like, right? So, you know, you get a listing, right? You list it for sale just like you would any other property. Don't put something in the listing agreement or in the, MLS that says 1031. It's just a purchase, right? For the buyer. It's no different, right? Now you do need to put some language, or you should put some language in the contract to the effect that the seller's doing an exchange, right? There's a CAR form that you can use, or you can simply put in seller's intent is to complete a 1031, which will not delay the closing and cause any additional expense to the buyer, right? So you negotiate, you put that in the contract, you open up an escrow. Now, if you get an offer and you counter that offer and you include that exchange language in there, and the buyer's agent calls you freaking out saying, you should have told me this is a 1031. That should immediately tell you they know nothing about 1031, right? Because it doesn't affect them at all, right? So you open up an escrow. Oh, wait, before that, you contact Dory, get a title report, right? You were talking about it earlier, and my mother-in-law, who now lives with us, and she was a very good top-level agent and broker up in Santa Barbara, owned her own company for a long time. And she is one of the most ethical, real estate agents that I've ever come across. And one of the things that she used to do with her customers was she was like, we're going to order the title report, make sure that there's no title issues that we need to clear up before your property's even listed for sale. Once we're about to list it for sale, we're also going to order an inspection. We're going to pay for those inspections. And we're going to get all of that out of the way. So when a buyer makes us an offer, we're going to give them all this information. So they're like, hey, we want to make an offer. Okay, make an offer. We immediately give it to them. So that all of that stuff is out of the way. And she really actually was very effective at doing it. And it really was a great thing about getting all of that stuff. So there was something in the inspection report that was going to derail the deal. She would know about it ahead of time, say, hey, we need to fix this. Like she did a deal on this house up in Rancho Barcadero where the inspector was like, literally believed, I think there's one beam that's holding up this entire house. She's like, I can't sell this house. She's like, I'm just not going to be the agent to sell it because I think there's too much liability now that I know this, right? And then another agent got it and sold it. But for her, it was all about being ethical. So getting your ducks in a row in the beginning is good. Also, when you're doing a 1031, make sure that the client has a plan in place, right? So selling an asset just because it's highly appreciated is not a good plan for 1031, right? It's like 2 years ago, I called my wife. We had bought a new house in 2019, and I called her, 2 years ago, 2023 or 2022, and said, hey, I was on realtor.com or Zillow or one of them, I can't remember what it was. And I saw the value of our house. We really need to sell it. I said, we've made a bunch of money. She said, yeah, okay. She said, but find us a place to live first. And then, look around, tell me what you find. So, you know what I found out when I started looking around? Everybody's house appreciated just like mine. So, you're buying and you're selling in the same market. So you got to make sure that you go in there with a plan in place. You're not selling high, buying low, right? So you've got to make sure you go with a plan in place. What are we trying to accomplish, right? Are we buying a house for our kids? Are we doing it for a vacation home? Are we trying to increase cash flow, reduce management responsibilities? Why are we doing it, right? Have a plan in place make sure that it's an executable plan, and then be aggressive early, right? I had a client call me yesterday on my way home. I was actually up here yesterday doing a presentation at the association. And they said, hey, I'm about a week away from closing, but I saw a property that I really want to make an offer on. I'm like, make an offer on, get it under contract. I said, even though we don't have any money yet, if you need to put up a deposit, just put up a deposit. And then once we get the money, we'll replace it. And if you don't have the money to put up a deposit, let them know, hey, my deal's closing at the end of next week, and I will give you the deposit within 24 hours of my close, right? And so I think that he was able to get that deal under contract. So be aggressive early, because in an exchange, you only have 45 days from the date that escrow closes to identify the new property. Now, getting an exchange set up, super easy, right? You call me up, you're like, hey, Greg, I've got 123 Lois Lane under contract in escrow. Here's my escrow officer's contact information. We'll reach out to escrow, get the exchange. Usually that takes a day or two at the most, right? When the sale closes, though, the proceeds of the sale come to us. And I will typically go to Cabo for at least 2 weeks.
Yeah.
At that point, that 45-day identification period starts, right? So the 45 days is a good thing for you guys. Has anybody in here ever worked with an unmotivated buyer? Yeah, I'll take that as yes, right? So you have someone that's very motivated. And not only are they a motivated buyer, but they're motivated to close, right? And I always get a chuckle when someone calls me and says, hey, Greg, I just got an offer. I'm a listing agent from this buyer that's in an exchange, but I don't know if I should accept it. I'm like, what's your concern? Well, I know that they could identify up to 3 properties, and I'm just not sure if they're serious. And I'm like, they're serious. If this cash buyer doesn't close, what's their tax liability? Probably nothing, right? This exchange buyer doesn't close on a replacement property, they're going to pay taxes. There's a penalty for them not getting the deal done, right? And I would say over the tens of thousands of deals that I have done, very few people who are going to buy one property, but multiple properties under contract. I strongly suggest that they don't do that. And the reason is because I've had clients that have done that in the past, where they are buying one property, but they're like, you know what, I'm going to put both of these properties under contract because I'm not sure which one I want yet, and it'll give me a better negotiating power. Well, okay, fine. You go do that. We send out 2 deposits. That's fine. Guess what? You cancel one deal, you send cancellation instructions. Guess what? The seller decides to drag his feet and not sign cancellation instructions. And then you're debating, oh no, you're not canceling on me. And now you've got to close on your purchase. You can't get your deposit back from this other sale because the escrow officer won't release it. So very rarely does that ever happen. Most people that are selling one property, buying one property, they have one property under contract. So typically a offer from an exchange buyer is a very good one, right? So, yeah.
Is there any case where you could, get an extension of those?
The only time you can get an extension is for a natural disaster, right? So if like the wildfires that happened in LA, the IRS issued a disaster relief notice for anyone that lived in LA County. So it extended any time sensitive tax deadline to October 15th. So if your 45th day was May 15th, you got it extended to October 15th. But other than that, there's really no extension.
So it's, identify it properly.
So basically to find a property.
Not, so that this can take forever and.
You can have another 135 days after that to close. So 45 days to find it, 135 days after that to close, right? So it's a total of 180 days. I used to tell clients you have 45 days to identify and a total of 180 days to close. What do you think that they would do? They would add 45 days to 180, come up with 225 days. I'm like, that's not what I said, right? So 45 plus 135, total 180, right? That's the way I explain it now. And that's only from, people misunderstanding what I'm trying to say. So, but people are pretty aggressive in the 45 days. But when people do wait is when they get more time. So like 1031 exchange, right? 45, 135, 180 to close. 1033 exchange, 2 years most times to reinvest. So guess what percentage of exchanges that we do get completed? Like what our success rate is for our customers? Any ideas, guesses?
99.
That would be nice, but it's 93%. So 7% failed, right? So that's a pretty low percentage. And that's not because of us, that's because of you guys, right? Out there hustling, finding the properties. Nothing to do with us. Now, in a 1033 exchange, they have 2 years to reinvest. They do not have to identify. What percentage of those deals do you think are successful? Only 30%. 70% fail. Because if you sell a client's property today, they have 2 years to reinvest. Are they aggressively going out and looking at properties? No. They're like, you know what? Market's a little funky right now. I'm going to go, I'm going to give it a year before I even start to look. The other problem with 1033s is the clients don't need to use a company like ours, right? Qualified intermediary to hold the funds. They can hold on to the money. So guess what they do? They spend the money, right? They're like, oh, I'll just borrow a little money here, borrow a little money there. Before they know it, they spent the money. So 1031, 45 days, good thing for you guys. Now, in order for the client, now on the buy side, pretty simple. Make an offer, get it under contract, alert us. We'll assign into the contract. We can send a deposit if you need one. And then when the client's ready to close, they authorize to send the money. We send the money, get it closed. In order for the client not to pay anything in taxes, they've got to do 2 basic things. They got to buy something that's equal or greater in value to the property that they sold. And that's the net sales price after closing costs, right? So it's net of like real estate commissions, escrow fees, forever low Chicago title insurance fees, right? You can back all of those out. So if I sell for $1 million, I pay 6% in closing costs, so 60 grand. My net sales price, 940. That's what I got to go replace. And I also got to reinvest all the proceeds from my sale, all the cash into the new property. If I do those 2 things, I don't pay any taxes. What if you had a client that found a property that they loved? It was only 900,000. Could they do an exchange? What do you guys think?
Yes.
Yeah, they can still do an exchange. They can still defer taxes. They're just going to pay taxes on that difference, right? You're gonna have some closing costs on the purchase, maybe 10 grand of closing costs. So you're gonna have a $30,000 difference. So they'll pay taxes on 30 grand. You also have clients that want to take cash from the sale. They can do that. You can take cash from the sale. You just pay taxes on whatever cash that you take, right? So, so we have clients like I have a client right now that's taking like 500 grand, which is a lot. But normally we have clients that'll take like 50 grand or 75 grand or whatever it might be. So no problem. It does lower what they need to go buy, right? So if I sell for like 940, let's say I want to take $50,000 in cash. I can do that. And now my target's 890, right? So it does lower what I have to go replace. Now, something that's very popular right now, reverse exchanges, right? So in a reverse exchange, you are buying the property that you want before you sell the property that you have. Now, just on the surface, what do you think is the tough part of that deal? You're going to close on your purchase without any money from your sale. So you have to have cash available to be able to do it, right? Loans on residential can be very tough. And the reason is because the exchange company creates an LLC that becomes the title holder. So you have, your property here. This is the property that the client wants to buy. Here's the customer. They make an offer. They get this deal under contract. They hire us, right? We create an LLC that steps in and becomes the new buyer. The problem with that on the residential side is that most lenders, I've heard Axos Bank is one of the banks that's doing it, but most lenders don't want to lend to LLCs on a residential real estate. And so because of that, most of these deals end up being cash deals. So what happens is the client loans the money to the LLC to buy this property. LLC gives them back a note for that loan. Now, they don't actually send money to us. They send it to closing, but the LLC shows it as a loan. The LLC, when we close on it, we don't want to actually own the property. So we triple that, lease it back to the customer. So that's, so they, collect rents, they keep insurance on it, they do maintenance, we're just holding title. And from the date that we close, it's a flip-flop of a regular exchange. They have 45 days to identify what they'd like to sell, which typically is pretty easy, right? They have up to 180 days to get it sold. Once the property they're selling goes under contract into escrow, we assign into that transaction like a regular 1031. So when the sale closes, what happens? Money comes to us, right? Then we use that money to pay them back the money that they loaned the LLC. So they can then put that money back from wherever it came. And then to avoid double transfer taxes, instead of transferring this property to them, we give them 100% interest in the LLC. So the LLC that's holding title stays on title. We just give that to the customer. So we give them 100% interest in it. It's a more complex type of transaction. It is more expensive. So a regular 1031, we charge a flat fee of $1,000. Reverse exchanges typically range between $6,500 to probably $8,500 for most of the deals that you do. But like I was talking to a client yesterday, and he was like, and his fee for his deal was going to be like $10,500 because it was like a $5 million deal. And he was like, well, it's a lot better than the $350,000 I got to pay in taxes. So for most clients, because of their tax liability, the fee is not really that significant.
The only negative with that is that you might get a smaller selling price because you're pressured to sell.
You're more motivated to sell, right? So
Yeah,
it's the
yeah.
exact opposite of like a regular exchange
Right.
where you have a motivated buyer. Now you have a motivated seller.
Yeah, you're gonna have to price really aggressively to meet that time frame.
Yeah, so the thing that I found that's interesting, it seems like in every market that I've been in, and I could be wrong, great deals get multiple offers and good deals sell, right? So you kind of have to price it as a good deal, otherwise it may not sell.
I was taking notes when you first started talking about this process, so maybe I missed it,
Yeah.
but what's the benefit of somebody doing the reverse exchange versus the typical 1031?
So it's a great question. Typically, we have found that the people that do reverse exchanges are like actively kind of looking at property and find something that they can't live without. Like they're like, oh, I really wanted to buy a property in Shell Beach, and because I'm doing one up there, the perfect property came on the market. And my property in Folsom is not even on the market. This tenant's still in it. I won't be able to sell it. I've got a 30-day escrow. And I've got to close on this thing, but I really got to 1031 these dollars into it. That's what happens 90% of the time. The other thing is that my bigger customers, they buy assets with the idea of selling an asset, but even if they don't sell their asset, it's okay because they just want to own the asset. And they're never exposed to taxes, right? So like one of the REITs that I do business with, they are a industrial REIT. So they find an industrial deal, they go, hey, we want to buy that. We're going to set up a reverse exchange because here's a couple properties that we may potentially sell to exchange into this asset that we'd like to get off our books. But even if we can't sell these in 180 days and our reverse exchange fails, we still want this property. So it doesn't really matter. So they end up just owning the both properties. So the advantage of reverse exchanges is you're never exposed to taxes, right? Because you have not sold anything yet.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I know we covered a lot of stuff. You guys have any questions? Yeah.
Might be a little off topic, but you just mentioned REITs. What are your favorite REITs to invest in?
So there's an interesting phenomenon going on right now with REITs, which is REITs are doing these things where they're taking properties out of the REIT. They're creating a DST where you have people that are exchanging into it. And then after they hold those assets for 2 years, they're exchanging into the REIT. There's this thing called a 721. Blackstone is a great REIT. Essex is a very good REIT.
Essex.
Essex?
Essex.
Yeah. But there are some good ones. exist out there. There are some ones that are facing some challenges. I mean, a couple of my clients, not so specific, they're Office REIT, Kilroy Office REIT, they're definitely facing some challenges. I like multifamily, but I think that I've always liked multifamily and self-storage. For almost all of my career, industrial has always been like almost little to no vacancy. It's been kind of the darling of investment real estate for almost my whole career. This is the first time in my career where I've seen industrial going through some challenges. So Prologis is a great industrial REIT. But I have this affinity for self-storage and apartments. I think apartments came from my stepfather, who was an apartment guy, who put together partnerships and owned apartments. And his theory behind real estate ownership in general was we own apartments because people always need a place to live, no matter what, right? And so even if the market's bad, we can lower our rents, we can give away a month free, but we can keep our apartments full. And so, and that has kind of become true, even though rents have softened, and you've got a lot of regulation, especially in California, with like rent control and landlord tenant rights and all that kind of stuff. It's still a great asset class. And then self-storage, it's amazing how low vacancy is in self-storage. People love to store. Listen, I'm a great example of a self-storage idiot. So my wife lived in Santa Barbara, and I stole her, brought her down here. She already had a house, 2 kids, you know, and a house full of furniture. Well, the house that she moved from, I think, 3,000 square feet to my house, which was 1,300 square feet, which already had 2 bedrooms full of furniture. So only thing we needed was basically furniture for the kids. And so to set up their room. So we took all of her furniture, which was very nice furniture, and we put it into storage. And I held that storage for 10 years. It was enough to basically buy all of that furniture brand new again. But people, right? It's you have something of value, you don't want to like throw it away. And then all people also use it for like, you know, holiday decorations or whatever. And so many of my friends have storage. It's amazing, right? And so I was eventually able to get rid of the storage. And then I got another storage back, was able to get rid of it. So I have no storage fees right now, which is great. But people love to hold on to their stuff. And you know, and so self-storage, they stay very full. They really stay very, very full. So they're a good investment, I think. Like Public Storage is a great company. They're, you know, to look at, invest in.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So back to the parents and kids
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
So the last step, I heard you talk about a little bit later. So if they rent it out to their kids.
Yeah.
So they sell or they pull equity out of the first place to purchase a property to start with. So that's
They can do that. They could sell, exchange it, and
Right.
go buy a property that way. There's different ways of doing it.
So if the kids take care of the parents though, could that still qualify if they're renting it to the kids?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Oh, so you're saying if the parents live with the kids?
Right, so
It's a little bit tougher. If I 1031 exchange into a property where I sell, use the money to go buy a property, the kids are paying me rent, but
right,
I actually live there. It's
these
part of the property that is not really investment.
is these parents in particular, they own multiple properties.
Yeah.
They have one that they're gonna sell and they're trying to move closer to other families, so the parents are kind of going back and forth
Yeah,
in between homes. Not necessarily staying there, but the sister is also trying to live closer to the other sister.
yeah.
To take care of mom and dad.
I think you could structure a way to make it work.
Okay.
I do think.
I'm gonna put them in touch with
Structure a
you.
way- a way to make it work.
I'm just curious how it looks on the house that they're trying to sell, because the parents haven't been living in that property for some time.
Yeah.
They've been renting it to like nephews.
Yep.
Now the kids are moving in over there. And I'm just curious, how do you provide proof?
On your taxes.
Right, if
Showing
it
the-
did get
showing the
questioned.
income. Yeah, showing the
Right.
income, yeah.
So it's shown income?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
income, yeah. Another thing that's interesting about that is that I had a client that did a 1031 exchange. They bought a house in Orange County for their daughter. And he was a very smart guy, attorney. He's like, Greg, my daughter can't pay fair market rent. She's a single mom. She's a school teacher. She can't pay fair market rent for this house in Orange County. So I said, well, that's what the rules say. Ultimately, talk to your accountant, see what you can come up with. So they were pretty inventive. So she pays what on the surface looks like fair market rent. Now it's not exactly the house association rent for $4,000 a month. She pays $2,800 a month, right? But it's a reasonable amount of rent. But they pay her a property management fee every month. They also pay her maintenance fees for all the maintenance she does on the house. So they've really kind of adjusted her rent down to about $1,500 after all of these fees that she charges back to them. So it is an interesting way. Now, you get into the same 2-year rule, right? So as long as I hold that as an investment for 2 years, right, and I rent it to my kids for 2 years, and I show it as they're paying fair market value for 2 years, after that, I could do whatever I want with it. So I can decide, you know what, I don't want to charge them rent. So you could get away with probably not having to charge them rent. So, but the first 2 years, you should try to do it as about 40.
I had a question. So I have a client who owns a property outright. It's a double net commercial property in South Carolina. And it's a Dollar General store, so similar to Dollar Tree, but Dollar General.
Yeah.
And it's vacant right now. She just listed for sale recently. She wants to do a 1031 down here. And I've been talking to her about it.
Yeah.
So at what point in that process did we get you involved? Do you just have a chat with
Typically,
her?
when
see what
that
you want to
property
do?
goes under contract and into escrow.
Okay,
And then there, they don't use escrow, they use title, or they'll use attorney closings, but
Yeah.
yeah, once it goes under contract, is a good time to get it.
okay. But should she still be looking at properties down there just to kind of see what things they got?
I think it's important to do your due diligence.
Yeah.
So when I had a client call me, they just put their property on the market. No, it just had gone under contract and they had like 45-day escrow, and they said, well, should we start looking? And I'm like, you should start looking, but understand that you're going to have to make offers contingent upon your property selling if you make an offer, which are less likely to be accepted. But
Right.
it is important to understand the market, right? So if I go, oh, I want to buy a property in Ventura, and then I've not done any research on that market, and then I'm 2 weeks or a week away from closing, or maybe I close, and you're like, okay, here's a bunch of stuff that kind of meets your criteria. And I'm like, Jesus, it's expensive up there, right? And I've not done any research.
Right.
So I don't know what's a good deal and what's not,
Okay.
right? But if you educate them on the market, then when you show them something, you're like, hey, we need to move on this deal, they'll realize, okay, yeah, we need to move on this deal.
Okay, cool.
So yeah.
Thank you.
Are you seeing homes or the process being impacted when people buy a single family residence and they're adding multiple duplex or ADUs?
We are seeing clients do that, even on the apartment side, they're doing it. So it's definitely something that's happening. I have a tough time seeing clients do it as part of a 1031, using 1031 dollars, because there is a type of exchange which allows you to buy an asset and then use remaining funds to make improvements. I did have a client that bought an asset that already had a pre-approved ADU to be built on that property, that was able to do actually with a ground up construction as part of their 1031. But because it's so hard to do that within that 180-day period, we're not seeing a fair amount of that. But you are seeing guys that are buying properties with the intention of adding value by adding that ADU, basically turning it into a duplex.
They still have to meet that 180-day timeline.
Well, if they're gonna use the funds from their exchange to build it, they do. But if they're just buying it, they can buy it and then, build the ADU later. So if I'm gonna complete my exchange, buy this investment property, my exchange is completed, then I'm gonna use, other funds to build the ADU or refinance, use that money to do ADU, you certainly could do that. Yeah. What are you guys seeing in the market?
As far as what?
It's overall market, you feel like the overall market, like in the area, what are you seeing with it?
We're seeing still consistent. The market's still consistently selling.
Yeah.
There's an overabundance of condos and townhomes
Okay,
because of the insurance issue. So a lot of the master policies are not. They're not covering the home sufficiently enough, so they're not warrantable. You can't get a loan on a lot of these places, so they're depreciating. HOAs are going up through the roof from $350 to $1,000 because of
Really?
the special assessments. So people can't afford it. So we're seeing a mass exodus of condos and townhomes. So it's not a true, when people think you see all this inventory, that uptick in inventory, a majority of it is that, or people that have just thrown something that's ridiculously high.
yeah. So I look at So when I'm looking at the market to try to figure out what's going on with it, I'm not looking at areas like Camarillo or Oxnard or Ventura, because those are very desirable places to live. You look at markets like Santa Maria, Palmdale, Lancaster, Victorville, those are where you really see the first signs of stress.
Yeah.
Also, like secondary markets like an Arrowhead or a Big Bear, or, maybe like a Lake Havasu. And so you did see inventory levels kind of spike in those areas, but they kind of flattened out. And you even in those areas, that you're really a fair amount of inventory in those markets that's not really sellable. That's overpriced, that are not really sellable assets, right? And so it seems like the market is still kind of steadily moving along.
It's a correction, because you're right, and we actually have a client right now looking at Port Sale, Lancaster, that area. Port Sale is actually still desirable versus Lancaster, even though they touch each other.
Yeah.
But that's the key, what you just said. It's like, okay, if I'm gonna make this sacrifice, drive, deal with that traffic, it's gotta be worth it.
Yep.
It's not just affordability. So now they're going, okay, well, there's homes in the market that are sitting there. I can negotiate.
Yeah.
From a buyer's perspective, it's a great time.
Yeah.
Because now they can get their closing costs. They don't have to compete with multiple offers.
Yeah.
They can negotiate on price, terms, everything, get
Yeah.
things fixed. So if they're weighing it out, it's like, okay, what is really the price difference here? So because it's not significant enough, those homes need to drop.
Yeah.
Dramatic.
Yeah.
For them to drive out.
Yeah, I'm seeing like in like the Victor Valley areas, you're only seeing prices have come down maybe like 30 to 40,000 bucks. Certainly could need to come down significantly more for
Yeah.
people that say, what, I'm willing to make that commute. For a while, I thought that they weren't going to come down because you had so many people that were like remote workers, but there's been a big push to get people back into the office. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how the market fares out. But it seems like market is like been pretty steady.
Yeah.
I mean, it's across the board as far as in the markets that I've been looking at. The inventory levels, I know last week, like Victorville's one that I watched closely. Like the number of opens and escrows have shot up significantly. So we'll see if that continues or not. So listen, use me as a resource. I am just an extension of your team, right? You do not need to be an expert in 1030. You need to know enough to kind of be able to give people a decent, overview of it, and then get me involved. And that could be at any point. That could be, hey, I've got a client that owns investment property. They are considering selling, or maybe they're not considering selling. They're looking at a strategy that may work for them. Can you get on the phone? Absolutely. So, that's the groundwork that we lay to ultimately, hopefully turn into deals someday in the future. So anything I can do to help you guys, I am happy to do it.
So we're also we encourage people to do a buyer's consultation. Would you be open to meeting with the agent and another potential buyers considering doing these types of moves?
Yeah, anytime that I can help, I'm happy to help. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like, I am here to help you guys, transact, and ultimately that, hopefully at some point will turn into 1031s for me.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you have it.
Any other questions, guys? No? Anything else?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
That was excellent.
Thank you.
Very helpful. So
Yeah.
Thank you for spending the time and.
Absolutely.
And this is your brochure here. This is, if you guys need his information, it's right here.
Yeah, I've got some more out there though.
Hey, Ken.
Is this something that have you done for, like, if we invited clients or people in the public that would be interested in learning more about 1031, have you done that?
I have.
Is it something you're open to doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Maybe we can coordinate something, whether in the final fourth quarter or first quarter, where we.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I had an agent one time in Downey, she had just started, she had no direction. And she was like, I did a seminar just like this, and she was like, I have no direction. She's like, I'm gonna do an investor seminar. I'm like, okay. So she got some, PowerPoint slides from her, our manager on kind of what was going on in the Downey market. And so she talked for 5 or 10 minutes about, some different numbers. And she had a mortgage person come in, seeing kind of what's going on with rates. And then I talked for 45 minutes, but she had 50 people there. And I think she ended up getting 4 or 5 listings out of them. And so it's awesome. Investors don't get marketed to owner user. So, you know, when you hit those people, you don't get marketed to the same way, so it creates a good opportunity. And yeah, I'm happy to do.
That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for your time today.
Absolutely.
It's nice meeting you.
Yeah, you too.
All right, guys, get to work. Start
Plenty
calling.
of food here too.
Yeah.
So if you guys haven't gotten, there's burritos and pastries. Thank you, Dory, for coming out. It's good turnout. I've got a lot of people in here. It's a video. You guys act like you're working. Awesome meeting here. I like you love working here.
One thing, remember, we have to put the number. That one number.
Okay, so that's-
I've got some, we have a whole bin of. But I think it's like paper clips. Every unit, I have thousands that we don't ever touch.
Yeah.
It's good.
Okay, yeah, I'm really good.
How are you doing?
You want to get your clients there, let me know.
They're ready.